Nature's Nectar, Jitter Juice, Satan's Brew, Blessed Brew, and Heart Starter. What do you think I'm talking about? Here's a hint. It's the second most consumed beverage in the entire world, second only to water. The answer, of course, is coffee. In an online article titled Coffee Consumption Statistics, Simple Stats for Journalists, written and last updated on October 12, 2025 by founder and CEO of Balance Coffee, Mr. James Bellis, he states that in the United States, over 517 million cups of coffee are consumed daily. That translates to just under 190 billion, with a B, cups of coffee consumed every year. So I've been drinking coffee very steadily for the last 25 years, and I've never taken the time to understand why coffee does what it does. And I bet that's true for many of you too. You probably don't know why it's called jitter juice, or maybe you do. Well, in this discussion, I'm going to go over some of the potential health benefits and risks of drinking coffee, a brief history on how coffee became so popular, and go over the science behind why coffee does what it does and how the human body reacts to it. So coffee, is it good for you or bad for you? The answer is yes. It's both good and bad for you, but it just depends. According to an article by the Mayo Clinic published online in January of 2025 titled, Is Drinking Coffee Healthy? There are many possible health benefits from drinking coffee daily. There's also a few possible side effects from daily coffee use. The Mayo Clinic is rated the #1 clinic in the world according to Newsweek as of 2025. Some benefits of drinking coffee, according to the Mayo Clinic article, are lowered risk of Parkinson's disease, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease. Coffee is also linked to lowering depression and increasing the mood. So maybe that's why some people are intolerable until they've had their first cup of joe. Despite some of these benefits, coffee does also have some health risks, such as increased anxiety, headaches, faster heart rate, and lowered bone density for women that are pregnant or nursing. Coffee also has the side effect of being addictive because caffeine is a stimulant. Now that we've discussed how coffee may affect you both positively and negatively, let's get a better understanding of how coffee became the second most popular beverage in the world. Coffee has become a staple of everyday life for many people worldwide. What's so special about coffee that makes it so popular? Jonathan Morris, a research professor and historian at the University of Hertfordshire in Hatfield, England, is author of Coffee, A Global History, and that was published in 2019. In his book, he goes over the history of why coffee is so popular throughout the world and has become a staple of everyday life for many people worldwide. So coffee's first appearance may have been as early as the 15th century in Arabia. And from the 15th century to the start of the 18th century, it was grown exclusively in Arabia and Africa. It was primarily used by people to stay awake for long periods of time for long prayer sessions. Then in the 1700s, coffee was traded from the Ottoman Empire, where it made its way to Europe. And it was that bold, bitter taste, coupled with the fact that it created boundless energy for people, that many became very suspicious of it, and they deemed it an invention of the devil. So maybe that's where it got the nickname, the Devil's Brew. However, there's a legend that Pope Clemente VIII, he tasted coffee and he happened to love it. He loved it so much that he actually blessed it. So maybe that's the reason why some people call it the Blessed Brew. Now in the 21st century, only about 9% of coffee is actually grown in Arabia and Africa. 90+% is grown in Asia and Latin America instead. So now that we know more about where coffee came from and how it made its way from across the world and into our hearts, let's discuss why coffee does what it does and how it affects the human body. Have you ever wondered why coffee helps keep you awake and alert, but also wondered why later in the day you go from being wide awake to all of a sudden being passed out on the couch with the TV on? Well, in the Huberman Lab podcast, Dr. Andrew Huberman hosts Dr. Matthew Walker to discuss how caffeine affects the human body and sleep patterns. Dr. Huberman is a tenured professor at Stanford University's School of medicine, and Dr. Walker is a New York Times bestselling author of the book, Why We Sleep. He's also a tenured professor with the neuroscience at the University of California, Berkeley. And in an October 1st, 2021 podcast episode titled Coffee and Sleep, Dr. Walker explains the science of how caffeine works in our bodies to give us that jolt of energy when we drink it. Dr. Walker explains that when we're awake and our brains are active, the neurons in our brain begin to combust. And the result of that combustion is a byproduct chemical known as adenosine. So the role of adenosine is to create a chemically induced tiredness that's supposed to build gradually throughout the day. And the more adenosine that accumulates throughout the day, the more tired we feel. Caffeine functions in that it competes for the same receptors that adenosine tries to latch onto. So rather than activating the actual sleep receptors, it just plugs up the hole, leaving adenosine nowhere else to go. Dr. Walker equates how caffeine, adenosine, and the adenosine receptors react like a game of musical chairs, where adenosine receptors are the chairs, and caffeine and adenosine are the players. And caffeine happens to move around a lot quicker, so it takes up all of the chairs, leaving adenosine to stand around and do nothing throughout the day. And then more and more adenosine enters the room with nowhere to go and nothing to do. Caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 6 hours and a quarter life of 10 to 12 hours. So this equates to caffeine maintaining its potency in your body from anywhere from 5 to 12 hours. After caffeine suddenly exits the system, all this accumulated adenosine from the day suddenly latch onto those receptors, which cause the infamous caffeine crash. And anyone who's been drinking coffee for a long period of time has probably experienced a caffeine crash or two. Depending on how late in the day a person drinks coffee in relation to when they're actually trying to sleep, may affect when they fall asleep, how deep their sleep is, and how rested they actually feel after that sleep. So in closing, through research, I've learned many things about coffee, and I hope you have too. We discussed some of the benefits and risks of drinking coffee, like improved mood and lower risk of heart disease, as well as headaches and lowered bone density for pregnant women. We explored some of the origins of coffee and how it traveled the world and earned some of its popular nicknames, like Cheddar Juice. Lastly, we learned what adenosine in the brain does and how caffeine works against it to produce the infamous caffeine crash, as well as affecting how poorly we may sleep. So the next time you're drinking your heart starter, you now have something interesting to talk about relating to your second favorite drink. So with all that being said, drink up and enjoy your cup of joe. You can always sleep when you're dead.